Welcome back to the 1 in 3 Speakout, hosted by Advocates for Youth. I'm Shivana Jorowar, and I'm privileged to be one of the hosts for this historic event. We are beginning our 7th hour of the first ever online abortion Speakout. Throughout the day, we'll be hearing from over 100 people talking about their experiences with abortion care. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks to the many people who are joining us with their personal stories. As many of you know, 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in her lifetime here in the United States. Despite the fact that abortion is a very common event, we rarely talk openly about our decisions to end a pregnancy. For too long, conversations around abortion have been dominated by politicians and anti-choice activists who use shame and stigma as a tool to silence people and to advance legislation that limits access to abortion services. Today, we're working to build a new conversation, one that is grounded in the lived experiences of real people, one that works toward building community rather than isolation, compassion rather than shame. We are shattering the silence. We honor the long tradition of speakouts that started on the eve of the historic Roe v. Wade decision. We also honor the long tradition of storytelling in social justice movements, the tradition of placing people and their lived experiences at the very center of the conversation. Today, Advocates for Youth is grateful for the opportunity to host and bring together people from all around the country to break through the stigma and shame people are made to feel around abortion and to highlight real people's experiences and stories around abortion care. In the last hour of the Speakout, we heard from Michelle, who was moved to share her story with a group of anti-abortion young people. From April, who described lacking access to safe abortion care not 40 years ago, but today. And from many others. All of us have a role in shattering the stigma and ensuring that women have access to safe and legal abortion care. So today, if you have a personal story and you would like to share it, just visit www.1in3campaign.org to share your written or video story. I'm joined in this hour by Alexandria, a 1 in 3 campaign activist at Tulane University. Welcome, Alexandria.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. I think today, of all days, sharing stories is very important because, as we may or may not know, today is the National Trans Day of Remembrance, and as we just heard from Jack, we always have to make sure that our movements are being inclusive and that we're always respecting people's gender identities.
Thank you so much for that reminder. We'd like to encourage everyone who's watching to go to our website and sign our pledge at this time to end the stigma and shame around abortion. You can sign right on the line at www.1in3.org. Alex, will you introduce our first guest? Alex, would you tell us a little bit about the work you do in this area? Because I know you're an activist and an advocate yourself.
Yeah, my main work, I guess, my overarching activist work is as an anti-racist organizer on Tulane's campus. I'm currently the co-convener of Students Organizing Against Racism at Tulane. And to that end, you know, realizing all these different intersections that come along with doing anti-racist organizing really prompted me to get involved with 1 in 3, even though how I got involved with 1 in 3 was actually an interesting situation because one of my friends who was graduating from Tulane, she felt that we weren't having a good enough pro-choice voice on campus, and so she found out the 1 in 3 campaign, got connected and all that, but she was also like, you know, I'm graduating at the end of the semester, I need someone to take over, and I was like, well, okay, why not? I did it, and along with my best friend, we are kind of working with Students United for Reproductive Justice on Tulane's campus. That's who we organize under to like fight, you know, abortion and stigma and maintain accountability in our organizing.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now we're joined in studio by Jodi Jacobson, editor-in-chief of RH Reality Check, who will share her story with us. Jodi, please start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Well, I have a couple of stories, I guess. I had an abortion when I was about 19 years old. used contraception, had a regular boyfriend, became pregnant, was in college, and wasn't ready to have a baby. And so it was a fairly clear and uncomplicated decision for me. And I was luckily in a place where I was able, without any trouble, to get really considerate, compassionate, and excellent medical care from our university hospital at the school that I was at. So for me, it was a really empowering experience to be able to take care of myself that way. And I have, ever since that time, wanted to protect those rights for other people. I have another story, which is that my mother had an illegal abortion and had many complications from that. She had 4 children, was in a violent relationship with my father, and ended up pregnant at least one time that I know of, that she had an abortion, and had complications from that resulted from having infection and ultimately having a hysterectomy. So I think that, you know, my mother's experience, which I didn't quite understand as a kid because I didn't know what was going on. My aunts were all there. Everybody kept me away and sort of told me stories. Your mom's just sick. She's not feeling well. I later learned were the complications of an illegal abortion. So in my childhood, even, I was living with the kind of issues that I work on today. And they have really carried me through to work both on behalf, in the memory of my mother, and also on behalf of my daughter and other women.
Thank you so much for sharing that story.
Absolutely.
And I know you do work around this issue every day. Can you talk a little bit about what that work is?
Absolutely. RH Reality Check is a daily online publication, and we focus on reproductive and sexual health and justice issues. What we try to do is proactively provide evidence-based news, analysis, commentary, and investigative research to inform media coverage of our issues and to proactively inform the concerned public about our issues, to make sure that amidst all of the distortions and bias and kind of, you know, false equivalencies that are made in media, that there is a publication that is holding us all accountable to making sure the facts are straight, and also making sure that the media is held accountable. In addition, we also, of course, by doing news and analysis and commentary, critique legal and judicial opinions. We just finished a big project called False Witnesses, which looks at the 14 primary false witnesses, people who have made a career out of distorting facts about abortion care in order to support laws like those that have enforced admitting privileges, or things where doctors are being forced to read scripts to women about the fact that an abortion will cause depression or breast cancer. Of course, there's no evidence for these things. So, but you have these people who are going around the country and actually getting paid with taxpayer money to repeat these lies over and over again, and then their false evidence is getting into congressional and legislative and judicial records, and being used to build a case against safe abortion care. So what we did was we uncovered those people, the amounts of money they're getting in taxpayer funds from different state legislatures, the laws that they've been connected to, and the lies that they've told, and balance that out with the actual scientific evidence that refutes their claims. So that's the kind of thing that we try to do, again, by trying to focus our work on making sure that the media is reporting accurately on our issues.
That's great. Thank you for joining us today, Jodi. I really love hearing about organizers and you know, people who basically organize for a living. That's really cool.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Shivana, who do we have next?
We're joined now by Renee, who will share her story via Skype. Renee, start whenever you're ready.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Renee, and I had an abortion when I was 19. And I had one simply because I wasn't ready to be a parent. I was in a relationship with my high school boyfriend, and it wasn't a healthy relationship for me. I had been on birth control pills, but I was working a retail job at the time and living paycheck to paycheck. and I didn't have the money to pay for my next birth control pill pack. And because of the lack of accurate sex ed that I received in school, I believe the myth that if you've been on birth control pills for a long time, as I had for several years, it's harder to get pregnant. Actually, the exact opposite is true. And so I got pregnant like that. So I realized that I was starting to get sick, and I ran down to the drugstore and borrowed some money and bought a pregnancy test. And I sat in the bathroom alone, and during the 2 minutes that I waited for that test to come back, hopefully negative, I just kind of thought about all the things that I would do if I got out of this terrible relationship and if I wasn't pregnant, what I could do to change my life. But it was positive. And so I cried for about 45 minutes, sitting on the toilet seat, just sitting there. Later, I got out of the bathroom, and my ex and I sat in the living room, and we talked about our options. And he did not want to look into adoption. I thought about adoption, and I thought about abortion, and I knew that I didn't want to be a parent. But I realized at the heart of it, I actually just didn't want to be pregnant anymore. And so the only thing that we could agree on was an abortion. And there was a clinic that was not too far from me, so I scheduled an appointment for the following week. I went to the clinic alone, and I was really sad that I didn't have anyone to come with me. But the clinic staff was so wonderful. They did an ultrasound, and just for me, like they do many people who have an abortion. But like 98% of the people who see ultrasounds, it actually confirmed my decision that I wanted to have an abortion, did not change my mind. The nurse who was with me was so wonderful. She was an Orthodox Jewish woman, and she held my hand during the abortion and was sitting next to me smiling when I woke up. She reminds me that religious people support abortion access too, and I will never forget her kindness. After the abortion, I didn't tell anyone, and I kept silent for 6 years. I didn't tell my parents, even though they were pro-choice. I was really worried that they might be mad at me. I didn't want people to know, not because I was ashamed of my abortion, but because of the way people treat people who have abortions, in particular women of color. And also like women who become parents at young ages, in particular, again, women of color. And so for me, as a biracial Black woman, I wanted people to see me as more than a statistic. And I wanted to be able to make a decision that I was happy with. Our bodies are so sexualized, and I didn't want people to judge me. But I realized that people often talk about abortion, have never actually talked to anyone who's had abortions, and they speak about us so negatively. And so I decided to speak out. And when I did, my parents were so supportive. My mom said that she was sad that she didn't get to come to the clinic with me because she wanted to have been there to support me. And my dad was really proud of me. He said that I made the best decision for me and my life. And so after I started speaking out, I heard so many abortion stories from my friends and family. And I really saw how much abortion is just one reproductive experience along a spectrum of pregnancy, parenting, adoption, abortion, miscarriage, and fertility. It's just one moment that 30% of us share. When I decided to share my story, I was working at a queer and trans youth organization, and with the young people who were speaking out and sharing their stories about bullying and harassment. And they wanted others to know that they weren't alone. And I realized like how powerful they were in doing it. And that is what really inspired me to speak out. And today is Transgender Day of Remembrance. It's a day that we remember the lives that we've lost of our trans friends. And it's a day that I think we have to remember that we have to fight like hell, that everyone can share their stories, they can live their lives authentically, they can live free of shame and stigma and be in charge of their own bodies. I believe that no matter how you feel about abortion, do you really believe that someone who makes a decision different than what you would have done deserves hateful comments? Everyone deserves love and compassion when they're making what can sometimes be a tough decision about their own lives. I have never regretted having an abortion. It was the best decision for me. What I do regret is not speaking out earlier. I was sad and isolated because of the hateful comments that people make about people like me. And I still get those. I still get death threats. But I also get beautiful, amazing messages from other people who've had abortions who are thankful that I speak openly about my abortion and let them know that they're not alone. So if you're out there, know that you're not alone. I support you. I am here for you. You are amazing and you are loved.
Renee, thank you so much for sharing that and helping to shatter the stigma. And now we have another beautiful piece of artwork to share, this one from Eva Wah, who's illustrated Natalie's story.
When I missed my period, I knew something was wrong. I pushed it to the back of my mind for a couple of weeks until I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was throwing up every morning and hadn't been to school in days. When I told my mother, sitting outside with cigarettes between her fingers, she told me that she already knew. She told me to make an appointment at Planned Parenthood for an ultrasound and asked me what I was going to do. I had no idea. My boyfriend Jay was excited. He wanted to be a daddy. He wanted a boy named Andrew. I tried to get excited. I knew that this was supposed to be a positive thing in every woman's life, right? I still wasn't so sure. I was 14 and nonstop sick. I fainted in the shower and nearly drowned. My mother and sisters were all teen moms. They never got to live their lives the way they planned. We lived in poverty, and I knew I didn't want that for myself. I made the appointment before telling Jay, April 8th, 12:30 p.m., $650 up front. My mom paid. I told Jay, and while he was reluctant, he eventually agreed that it would be the best situation for us. I was 10.5 weeks along on the day of my appointment. The actual abortion procedure was uneventful, other than speculum's hurt. The nurses and doctors were all lovely, supportive, and warm. They took care of me. It's been a few years since I had my abortion, and I've never once regretted it. I kept waiting, influenced by anti-choice propaganda, that I would regret my decision, that I would become depressed, that I would think of myself as a murderer. While those feelings are perfectly normal and common, they weren't mine. I didn't have a baby. I had a blob of financial distress and broken career dreams. I had 3-generation cycles of teen motherhood and poverty that I refused to accept for my future. My abortion empowered me. The fearless staff at Planned Parenthood never tried to steer me in any direction and reminded me countless times that this was my choice. If I had to, I would do it all over again. Abortion is not a shameful secret. Abortion is health care. Abortion is good. Natalie.
Thank you so much for helping to shatter the stigma, Natalie and Eva. And I'd also like to thank Shivana, who's leaving us now. Shivana, 2 hours co-hosting the Speak Out flies by, doesn't it?
It does,
when
you're having fun.
Thank you for co-hosting today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you. Welcome back to the 1 in 3 Speak Out, hosted by Advocates for Youth. I'm Alexandria, a 1 in 3 campaign activist at Tulane University, and I'm privileged to be one of the hosts for this historic event. We are beginning the last hour of the first ever online abortion Speak Out. Throughout the day, we've heard from over 100 people talking about their experiences with abortion care. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks to the many people who are joining us with their personal stories. As many of you know, 1 in 3 people with a uterus will have an abortion in their lifetime here in the United States. Despite the fact that abortion is a very common procedure, we rarely talk openly about our decisions to end a pregnancy. For too long, conversations around abortion have been dominated by politicians and anti-choice activists who use shame and stigma as a tool to silence people and to advance legislation that limits access to abortion services. Today, we are working to build a new conversation, one that is grounded in the lived experiences of real people, one that works toward building community rather than isolation, compassion rather than shame. We are shattering the silence. We honor the long tradition of speakouts that started on the eve of the historic Roe v. Wade decision. We also honor the long tradition of storytelling in social justice movements, the tradition of placing people and their lived experiences at the center of the conversation. Today, Advocates for Youth is grateful for the opportunity to host and bring together people from all around the country to break through the stigma and shame people are made to feel around abortion and to highlight real people's experiences and stories around abortion care. In the last hour of the Speakout, we heard from activists at the University of Michigan who are working to ensure access to safe abortion care for everyone who needs it. From Jodi, who created RH Reality Check as a resource for quality journalism around reproductive health and justice, and from many others. All of us have a role in shattering the stigma and ensuring that people have access to safe and legal abortion care. So today, if you have a personal story, just visit www.1in3campaign.org to share your written or video story. I'm joined in this hour by Jeryl, a policy analyst with Advocates for Youth.
Thanks. It's really great to be here today. I'm really very honored to be a part of this organization and the amazing work that the 1 in 3 campaign does to help reduce the stigma and make sure that everyone has access to safe, legal abortion care.
Awesome.
Great. So I've been able to pay attention today to all of the stories that women have been sharing from across the country, helping to stop the stigma and really share their experiences, which is at the heart of what we are talking about today. So it's been really amazing to watch the courageous stories, and I really applaud a lot of the people who have been able to share their stories today.
Definitely. So what is it like for you working for Advocates, the organization that has put this on? Just how do you enjoy it there?
So for me, Advocates is really a dream organization to get to work for. Reproductive rights and protecting rights for people to have sexual and reproductive autonomy is something that's really integral to me and my interests. And so being able to work for an organization that really puts at the heart people's lived experiences and their stories is really amazing.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Now, I'd like to share a pre-recorded video by Tania.
Okay, so my name's Tania, and I got an abortion my first year of college. I can honestly say that I've never really felt bad about getting the abortion, and that I never regretted it, and not a second thought passed through my mind at any point in time. The decision was super clear. I'm a pre-med student, and I've got a lot of years of school ahead of me and residency, and trying to do that with a baby was just not opportune. And I mean, I don't really have a very good financial state either, and medical school is expensive, and it just wasn't even an option, right? Just whatever. I don't even know if I want to have kids, right? And when I initially read the pregnancy test, I was like, wow, that's not supposed to happen. I'm having protected sex, right? I was like, this is not even fair. I played by the rules. Forget about it. So I got my abortion. It was fairly early when I found out I was pregnant. I went into Planned Parenthood, and they told me I had to wait a week so that it could come up on the ultrasound, so that they to make sure that I was pregnant before they gave me the pills. So I had a week to sit around and think about it, and even during that week I was like, okay, well, I'm getting an abortion. That's what I'm doing. No big deal. And my partner was super supportive. He was like, whatever you want to do, I'm down. And it's kind of crazy, I guess, or it's kind of unusual that I haven't told anyone in 3 years until yesterday. I've only told 3 people, and the first person I told me that I was a bad person for getting an abortion. He was all like, yeah, I get it, I understand you're young, but you should take responsibility for the things that you do, which is kind of ludicrous, because I mean, I took responsibility. I paid $600 out of my pocket to get an abortion, but whatever, that's fine. I just realized at that time that saying that you have had an abortion will change people's minds about you, And that completely put me like in like, okay, well, I'm never going to tell anyone about it because I don't need people changing their minds about me over something, whatever. But I've recently realized that it shouldn't matter. I made a decision that was right for me, and that's all that's important. If someone's going to change their mind about me over the fact that I used medical services that are available to me, then that's where they're wrong, not me. I'm not a bad person for getting an abortion. They're a bad person for judging me for it. And I think that that's really important, because as much as I as much as I say that I've never felt bad about it, the fact that I've been scared to tell like the closest people to me, people who support me in everything that I do and I know wouldn't judge me, is just sad almost. And yeah, if anyone's in that position, you shouldn't be scared, and you made the decision that was right for you, and that's all that's important.
Thank you for sharing that and helping to shatter the stigma. So as we are getting towards the end of our Speak Out today, how are you feeling about the stories that you've heard?
I was actually just thinking during Tania's video, I've been here at the headquarters all day since about 12, hanging out with everyone and interacting with people via Twitter, Facebook, our hashtag 1in3speaks. Earlier today, it was in the top 10 trending on Twitter in the United States.
Wow.
That was really powerful to see. It's been very interesting because actually, until this year, I didn't know anyone that had had an abortion. But within the last year, I've heard from 2 people very close to me that have. And it's just very powerful to share stories, especially around something as controversial as abortion, something that is so politicized and something that people are made to feel shame about. I'm very glad that not only are we shattering the stigma, we're creating a new culture, one of sharing and one of community and love.
I think that's very important. Now we'd like to share a pre-recorded video from Deb Arundel, Policy Director at the American Sexual Health Association.
From your experience, can you tell us how laws restricting access to abortion care impacted your life?
Well, I can tell you a fairly harrowing story that for many years I didn't think of as being my story. But when I look at it in the context of where we are today, I realize that it's my story and probably the story of many other women as well. In the spring of 1971, I was a freshman in college at the University of Oklahoma, and a very dear friend of mine was going to be leaving for spring break or Easter, one of those breaks where the dorms are almost empty. And she asked me if I would spend the weekend and help out a friend of hers who had just been to have an abortion. She had been to a doctor in a little town outside of the city that our campus was on, and the way that he took care of her problem was to pack her through her vagina with lots of gauze, lots and lots of cotton gauze. And then over the period of a few days, she was to drink some amount, maybe a teaspoon, tablespoon, I don't remember, but some amount of turpentine in hot tea. And the purpose of the turpentine was to combine with the packing through her vagina, that the combination of these 2 things would cause her to miscarry or to abort. Well, as you can imagine, it is pretty challenging to drink turpentine in hot tea. And when I gave her this hot tea, my job was to make sure that she was taking the turpentine and the hot tea on a regular basis. She would gag and she would retch because it was horrible, and she was pregnant and she was afraid and I was afraid. And so one of my big contributions to this weekend was figuring out that it would be easier for her to keep this turpentine down if she had it in something that was cold. So I gave her turpentine in Tang. Over the course of a couple of days, at one point, she was screaming. There was pretty much just us on the floor of the dorm, and she was in the bathroom crying and screaming, and she's bleeding, and there's this mass of white gauze hanging. And so I began to just pull. It felt to me like yards and yards and yards, I'm sure that it wasn't, of this gauze. And we continued with the turpentine and hot water. And she did a lot of vomiting and was quite sick. And then on that Monday, her good friend came back, and I went back to my dorm. So it was many, many years before I ever saw her for an extended period of time again. But over the course of that next couple of months, we never discussed it, we never had a conversation about it, and she avoided me and I pretty much avoided her. And I did not see her again after that for about 20 years. And when I saw her again, 20 years later, she didn't mention it, and neither did I.
And can you tell us a little bit about how that experience impacted your life?
I can't say that it necessarily impacted the direction of my life, but what I can say is that one of the hard lessons of that story is that it's not a matter of whether or not women will or will not have abortions. It's whether or not they'll have abortions that are safe and legal, or if they'll have clothes hangers and turpentine. And that's no choice.
Wow, that story really reminds us of what's at stake when women don't have access to safe, legal, and affordable abortion care. The story that we just heard about the turpentine, about the terrible conditions that women go through when they don't have access to what should really be considered health care. It's reproductive health care, and it's important that we have access to it and that we're not stigmatized. And I think that's one of the most important things about today's Speak Out and about helping to shatter the stigma around what is really a health procedure that women need and should have access to.
Yeah, definitely. I'm honestly kind of speechless because of that. That was crazy. But I think it's very true. And that's something that's always been kind of odd to me when I get into these, pro, anti-choice discussions, all this kind of stuff, because, people will go to any lengths to not have a pregnancy, and so, by reducing access to abortion, you're not going to reduce abortion, you're going to increase dangerous abortions. Because if someone doesn't want to be pregnant, they will do anything in their power to do it, up to turpentine and hot water, apparently, and cotton gauze.
I think what's important about these stories that we're hearing today is for people who are in decision-making places around access to health care, making sure that they understand the experiences that people go through in order to get the care that they need, and recognizing that, for policymakers who are making decisions, I work with members of Congress on the Hill who talk about these issues and making sure that they understand that they are real people at the center of these issues. And now Elizabeth is going to join us on Skype to share her story. So Elizabeth, please start whenever you're ready.
Hello. Really grateful to be able to share today. Meant to go on earlier, and so I don't have childcare right now, so my daughter's going to be with me for my little presentation. I got pregnant when I was working and living as a volunteer in Guatemala. I had been dating somebody for about 9 months, a local man, and we had once had a conversation where he said, if this ever came up between us and you intended to have an abortion, I would never want to know about it. So he didn't know about it, and when it did happen that I was pregnant, I did a lot of soul searching. I had grown up in a church, very liberal Protestant denomination that I'm now ordained in as clergy, where I was never taught that it was a sin. We were a very pro-choice church and very supportive of women's rights. So I didn't have to deal with that baggage, but still was coming from a very nonviolent perspective. And so that was a part of what was going through my mind as I took the time to really discern what was best for me. I studied a lot and prayed a lot and thought about what my life would be like years later if I kept the child, if I gave it up for adoption or if I had an abortion, and it became very clear what the best choice was for me. I had the great privilege to be able to leave Guatemala, where abortion is illegal, and to be able to have the money and resources to come home to the United States. My best friend was in medical school at the time, so another great privilege, she was able to help me choose a clinic where she used to work and was there for me for the whole experience. I chose a medicine abortion to have more control over the experience, although I was not prepared for how much it hurt and how scary it really was. I remember very clearly when the pregnancy left my body, what an enormous sense of relief that was to have my body back and have myself back. The next day I did bury the fetal material, and for me as a person of faith and a person of ritual and ceremony and liturgy, that was a very powerful experience, and it felt like a very respectful way to close that potentiality in my life. I got back together with an ex-boyfriend from before I went to serve in Guatemala, and he did not want me to tell anybody. He was very ashamed, and so I kept it a secret until later that year I began seminary and began to become more of an activist for pro-choice issues. He and I broke up, and I started doing work with seminarians for choice, did a lot of organizing at Harvard at the Divinity School where I was, bringing speakers to campus where we could learn how to be clergy who could be compassionate and offer all options to people who came to us in need. I've since been ordained and become a pastor of a church, and that's a big part of my ministry, something I preach about and teach about and proclaim that God loves us, and we as women are moral agents who get to make decisions about our lives. I think abortion often gets couched in the idea of having that baby or not. And for me, it's also been about being able to have this baby who's right here with me, who never would have come to be if I'd had that other one. I wouldn't have this child. I wouldn't have the marriage I have now. I wouldn't have the career I have now. It might seem antithetical that a minister would have had an abortion, but if I hadn't had an abortion, I would never be a minister. So I'm grateful for the privileges that allowed me to make the choices I've made in my life, and I'm very grateful for organizations like yours that continue to do advocacy and get the word out about this important issue.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing your story and helping to shatter the stigma.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Now we're going to hear from Angela, who's sharing her story by pre-recorded video.
So, my junior year of college was probably, that was in the 90s. I was in a relationship with someone that I met, and we've been dating for about a month. Really great guy. We were having it felt like we were soulmates, had a lot in common. And after a month of dating, like I said, there was a point where I started feeling really sick. Just didn't feel good. Couldn't eat the same things. Certain smells made me really sick. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. So I went to the doctor. I was in college, like I said at the time. Didn't say anything to my parents. I was on their health insurance, so I had access to go to the doctor when I needed to. Made an appointment, and the doctor told me that I probably had acid reflux or something, and gave me some prescription for something. I got the prescription and took it for about a week or so, and nothing changed. In fact, it got worse, so I went to another doctor. And this doctor actually gave me a stronger prescription for my acid reflux. And after taking that second dose prescription that was given to me by the doctor, I really thought about it. I said, hey, Angie, it seems like it's been about 3 or 4 weeks that your period should be here, and it hasn't come. So maybe this could be a pregnancy. And I was terrified at that point. And I decided to let my partner know that I could possibly be pregnant. Maybe it's not acid reflux, but maybe there's something else going on. And decided to take a pregnancy test. And I remember going to the drugstore and getting the test and going back home. And I was visiting for the summer with my parents, so I went in the downstairs bathroom and locked the door so my nosy sisters didn't come in. And I sat there before I took the test, and I was so scared, just terrified. What would I do? I'm in college, I'm a junior, I still have a ways to go. I don't have a job. I come home and live with my parents when I'm not on campus, and I don't think on campus is a good place to raise a baby. I was struggling as it was to make sure that I was going to school. My parents were scraping every little thing that they could get to make sure that I went to school. So I knew it just wasn't a time for me to be a parent. I was in a relationship with someone that was wonderful. However, it was a month. And so I sat there and really thought about taking this test. And I decided, let me just go ahead and find out, get it over with. And so followed the instructions to the T, and it came up positive. And I said, well, okay, I did something wrong. Clearly this isn't true. And so I took another one and another one. So I took 3 tests, and they all said I was positive. I remember just kind of cowering down on the bathroom floor and feeling so lonely at that point in time. I was afraid. I felt like being a young woman, like I said, junior in college, this is not what I ever planned. So it really didn't take long for me to decide that the only thing that I could possibly do was to terminate the pregnancy, to have an abortion. So I had an abortion. Once I found out I was pregnant, I talked to my partner at the time, and he was very supportive. He said whichever way I decided, he would be very supportive. And agreed with my decision once I came to the decision to have this abortion, that, you know, we were young and we weren't ready. And so it was simple, very simple. All I had to do was call, find a clinic, because I'd never done this before. So find a clinic that I could go to and figure out what the process is, how much does it cost. That's another thing, being a college student, you just don't have money in your pocket all the time. So that was terrifying, but he was very supportive, so we made an appointment. I had to go in on a Saturday. Went to the clinic. It was nestled in a suburb that was not too far from where I lived, and like the town over. And I went to the clinic that morning, early in the morning, and I remember it being a beautiful sunny day, and nothing outside, no protesters, nothing like that. It just was like going to the doctor. So I went in, a very gracious, very nice staff that made me feel, because I was terrified, and not so much terrified about the decision I made, but just thinking all along that my parents would be so disappointed that I even got pregnant in the first place. So I remember going in, they were really nice. I went through the whole process. They took me in and did kind of like a mini physical, made sure everything was okay, talked to me about what I was doing, and asked me if I had any questions, explained everything. I went through the procedure, woke up, I remember waking up in the recovery room, being a little bit groggy but feeling fine. I was, basically left after that day. I probably stayed home the next day from work, but I felt fine. And I finally, because I still was really upset, and my upset again wasn't about my decision, it was about just really caring so much about what my parents thought of me. And I thought it was really important for me to have a conversation with my mom. So I actually talked to her about the decision that I made, and my mother was absolutely supportive of me. But the one thing that she did say that stuck with me, and it's the reason why I don't tell my story often, is that that's fine, you made the right choice for yourself, but this isn't something you talk about. So she made it very clear that this is something kind of hush-hush that people do, and it's okay if you do it, but you dare not speak a word of it. So, I went about my life just really not talking about it or thinking too much about it. So now I'm a mother with 2 beautiful children, and I'm thinking more about it, especially doing the work that I do and talking to young college students and young adults about sexuality and that kind of thing. This comes up a lot, and the questions that I get, I often wonder why we don't talk more about this. It's so important to share our stories, so important. Because I think of those moments that I was crouched down on my bathroom floor, terrified, feeling so alone, like no one else in the world was facing this. And so it's so important that we tell our stories, and this is why I decided to say that I had an abortion and be there and be a source for someone else that may need to talk to someone. So sharing your story is really important. If everyone were to share their story, the stigma would be lifted. There would be no reason to be ashamed, because you would see how many people have made this decision, made this choice.
We are joined on Skype by Barbara, who will share her story. Barbara, please start whenever you're ready.
Sure. I am Barbara. I live in New York. I'm 60 years old. I've had 3 abortions. I became sexually active before Roe v. Wade, and I had the unfortunate experience of birth control that was hormones hitting you over the head like a sledgehammer. So as soon as Roe v. Wade was enacted, I decided to switch to barrier methods. So a lot of my story has to do with the question of reliability of birth control. In any case, my first pregnancy was accidental, whether it was carelessness or birth control failure. I'm not 100% sure. I was about 20. I was a junior in college. I had a boyfriend. There was no question. I was able to have the procedure with a relative of a very good friend of mine, which helped. I wasn't particularly scared. It wasn't difficult. It didn't really hurt except a little cramping. My boyfriend was a little strange. He was just a strange guy, but other than that, he was totally supportive. I got pregnant the second time when I was in graduate school. I remember it was the fall because I remember the one conversation with my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, and we counted out the months and what would it be like, but there was really no question. We were in a position we weren't interested. We were not going to have a child because of an accident. So I went to the storied and much loved Eastern Women's Center, which I think is now Park Med, where I had a very friendly experience, and it was a very ambivalent experience. And then my last abortion, I was 44, and this is a little more interesting in terms of the stigma. I have always felt very strongly that abortion shouldn't be stigmatized. So in any case, I got pregnant by accident because I was 44 and I just really didn't think I could get pregnant. So when I did the little pregnancy test, even though I had the thought right after my second kid was born that I wanted to do this again, I had a fleeting thought. When I saw that little pink line, my head just said, no way. I mean, it screamed, no way. So my husband and I talked it over. It was pretty clear. It wasn't that much of a discussion because we really were happy with our 2 wonderful kids who are watching. Hi, gals. So I went to my doctor to terminate the pregnancy, and she said to me, this really doesn't look like it's so viable. So I've always told myself since then the story in my head that I didn't feel remorseful because it wasn't viable, that maybe the fact that it wasn't viable was part of the reason I didn't feel remorse. And I realized when I was talking to the 1 in 3 campaign people that that was a little bit of an internalized stigma thing, because I don't think I would be remorseful even if it was viable. I felt really strongly that I had 2 great kids. We did not want a third one. We didn't plan a third one. I think planned pregnancies are superior to unplanned pregnancies, I guess. And so I terminated the pregnancy. I feel really strongly about the question of stigma. During the 2000 election, and so my kids were 7 and 10, we had a bunch of people over to do a mailing for Planned Parenthood related to the presidential election. And one of my kids said, Mommy, did you ever have an abortion? And it was a really easy, I didn't even think it through. I just said, yes, I did. And some of the other mothers gave me a little bit of a look like, how could you say that to your 7 and 10-year-old kid? And one of them said, why? And this was before the third abortion. Why'd you have an abortion? And I said, because I was too young and I didn't want to have a kid. And I felt really strongly that I wanted to convey to my kids, and it wasn't thought out, but thinking back, why did I do that? I felt really strongly that sex is good, accidents happen, and if you are in the position, hopefully in the position to be able to deal with your mistake, I don't even like to call it a mistake, but either a failure of birth control or an impulsive moment. It's a medical decision, and it's between a woman and her doctor and her partner secondarily. And I did not want to convey one bit of shame or stigma to my kids, because I wanted them to grow up having a positive attitude towards sexuality and having control over their own bodies. So that is the sum total of my abortion story. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Barbara. We actually do have a few questions for you.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing your story and helping to shatter the stigma. So in speaking about stigma, why do you think it's so important to help talk about abortion and help to end the stigma?
Well, I mean, I was thinking about this today. Now I'm getting feedback, by the way, from you, just so you know. I think abortion is a medical decision. And I don't think it is just abortion that people feel shame. I think people feel shame about a lot of medical conditions. My husband had prostate cancer, and his openness about it sometimes takes people aback. So why do I think it's important? Because women should control their own bodies and not feel ashamed about it. Sexuality is a great thing, and sometimes there are unintended consequences, whether it be a pregnancy or a sexually transmitted disease, and we have a right to take care of that without feeling stigmatized. So how's that?
Well, you talked about having kids. Can you talk about, maybe advice that you would give to young people, to your kids when you're talking about things like sex and health conditions? What kind of advice would you give?
I have not been big on advice with my kids about sexuality. I think that if you convey a positive attitude towards sexuality and a very clear sense that women should control their own bodies, I think that positive attitudes about sexuality just kind of come from that. I feel pretty confident that my kids would come to me with anything that came their way in terms of sexuality. So far they have. And I think it's more kind of atmospheric than advice driven, if that makes sense.
Well, great, Barbara. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'm going to go home and have some dinner. All right, take it easy.
Shattering the silence around abortion experiences is very personal, and each story is unique. And as we have seen today, there are many different ways to shatter the stigma. Spoken word and poetry is a powerful way to end the silence. And now, we have a video from spoken word poet Adele.
Hi, my name is Adele Hampton, and this is my piece for the 1 in 3 campaign. I'm not afraid to say abortion. It's a word that falls lead heavy out of the mouth like your tongue can't handle the weight society hangs on its unassuming letters. Some call it a self-induced miscarriage, others name it a mistake. My girlfriend calls it what it is. Doesn't try to redefine the negative, instead taught herself how to forgive her past, learned to look in a mirror and not flinch. She took a pill, and now she wears trust in the shape of hands tattooed across the back of her neck. She tells me those hands would have been small like hers. She tells me that sometimes everything's a little harder than it needs to be. She tells me I feel like I have a debt. That's one I won't ever be able to pay. There are different stages of panic, she says. 1, when you accept that the lines are real. 2, when you pick yourself up off the floor. 3, when you learn to speak acceptance but never apathy. I have never had an abortion. I've never had to see life in a pink plus sign. I've never had to sit in recovery. I've never had to choose. But I've been 3 weeks late, standing still in a CVS aisle, picturing myself at 21 years old, at 9 months along, with nothing to my name but fear and trembling, repeating, "You can't hold a baby with shaking hands. You can't hold a baby with shaking hands. You can't hold a baby with shaking hands." Stephanie is 51. She's a minister and a stepmother. She said, "I chose abortion over suicide twice." She said she marks the result of each rape each year with great sadness, as she marks them with gratitude, gives thanks for safe and kind treatment, gives thanks for impartial treatment. Stephanie prays to God no one ever has to go through what she did. But we can't always choose. We can't always sidestep the hardship, can't always uncrumple the voice box society has tried to stomp out into dust. There is a woman, dressed simple and blue with the rosary held tight to her lips, standing in front of the Planned Parenthood I walk by every day. I wonder if she prays for forgiveness instead of hellfire on a place that provides sanctuary for so many. I want to tell her that heavy locks and bulletproof glass bar out the hate, so pray for strength instead of penance, because there is no judgment in that building. Because out there lurks the cattle prods. States are becoming factories for coercion and scare tactics, trying to duct tape the mouths of survivors, trying to tarnish the names of good women. They don't want us to question the ultrasound, the waiting period, the heartbeat. They don't want us to peel back the label of murderer read across our breasts. But you are not photographed. You're not a silent image of a former pulse, not a caricature of sin. Do not let the legislation of those who will call you unclean stifle whatever courage you've mustered to look at yourself in the mirror and not see catastrophe. Because there are no disasters here. You know, it's hard to write an ending for a poem that's about one. Abortion is a word that spills abruptly from the lips, but it is no stigma. No political tool to weed out the unpleasantries. Because it is what it is. It's an 8-letter word we should never be afraid to say.
That was a great video. Thank you for sharing that with us, Adele.
And now we're joined on Skype by Joy, who will share her story. Joy, please start whenever you're ready.
Hi, my name is Joy, and I'll share my story. I was 23 years old and had just finished undergrad. I was getting ready to go to South Korea to teach English for a year. And I was a regular contraceptor. I was using birth control pills. And most users of contraception, I was a typical user. I tried very hard to remember to take them every day and take them at the same time. Unfortunately, that sometimes I forgot. And so I was in a relationship over the summer before I left for Korea, and I found out I was pregnant. The decision for me to have an abortion was actually never something I questioned. It was just something I knew. It was something I knew right away, and I can't imagine not having been allowed that choice. The experience was not only empowering, I felt safe. I felt that the clinic that I went to really respected my decision and, helped me through the process in terms of, just from the time of arrival to the time of, having the procedure till discharge, just really talking me through the process and also helping me feel like it was a good decision that I had made with the counselors and things that they had provided and services on site. I think some of the truths that I would like people to know about abortion is that I think there's a lot of rhetoric that says that women will always regret this decision, and it was really the best decision I ever made. I had no regrets. I still have no regrets. And I'll say again that I'm so grateful that I was legally able to obtain an abortion. I was 23 at the time. Now I'm 35. I had my first baby when I was 35. And I think that's another one of the truths that I would like people to know about women who have abortions. We don't dislike babies. We just, as many women, want to choose the right time and the place to plan our families, not only for ourselves, but really for the sake of our children. So I now have a 15-month-old. And in addition to that, the experience really shaped who I became in terms of what work I do. I currently work as a registered nurse. I do triage, telephone triage for women on the East Coast who have had terminations and who need usually just medical support based on, some of just sort of symptoms they might be having after the procedure, and just someone to talk to let them know that a lot of what they're experiencing is normal. So it's really shaped who I've become as a person, and it's really allowed me to pursue, a nursing degree. I'm now getting my family nurse practitioner degree to really continue this work and focus on reproductive health. And I think without that experience or the ability to choose something like that and have the choice, I certainly would be in a different place. And that's really my story. I'm just absolutely normal person who is grateful for the opportunity to have had that choice and to really plan my family when I was ready and able to be the mother that I want to be. That's it.
Thank you, Joy, for helping to shatter the stigma. So Alexandria, look who is joining us on the set.
Oh my gosh.
It's Julia, who was one of the first hosts of the Speak Out almost 8 hours ago.
Hi there. Thank you both so much for hosting with us tonight, and thanks for welcoming me back. Today we spent the last 8 hours and presented only a fraction of the abortion stories out there. We've heard from people who have experienced abortion and providers who have given safe abortion care. We've heard from activists seeking to protect access to abortion care, and from champions working on federal and state policy to keep abortion safe, legal, and affordable. We've heard from women who sought out illegal abortion before 1973, and from women who faced restrictions or had to book a flight out of their home state to get abortion care as recently as last year. Women who faced pressures to remain silent or even outright condemnation from friends and family, and people for whom a supportive partner, friend, or parent made all the difference in the world. Abortion has and always will be a part of people's lives. It is part of the continuum of reproductive health care, which people need access to throughout their lives. We all know someone who has had an abortion, but the rhetoric of abortion opponents has created an atmosphere of stigma and shame that keeps people from sharing their real-life abortion experiences. It is this silence that allows restrictions on safe abortion care to flourish. But on the 1 in 3 campaign website, we have over 500 people who have shared their stories, and we receive more each day. Even today, we just received 50 additional people who have shared their stories, and we were joined by 100 people willing to share their stories during this event. We've also had over 1,000 people pledge signatures on the 1 in 3 pledge to end abortion stigma, all from people who understand the importance of fighting abortion stigma to keep abortion care safe and accessible for all those who need it. So much can be done to eradicate the stigma and shame people are made to feel around abortion. Each of us help make this change happen, whether through activism or on-the-ground policy work, art, or story sharing. Today is about joining together to change how abortion is talked about. Women's lives are complex. None of us can judge what we would do in another person's shoes. We must ensure that each person who needs abortion care is able to get it. We must put real people's experiences with abortion back at the center of our efforts to keep abortion accessible. These are our stories. And we have a little bit more time to talk with folks who are going to be joining us. But I just want to again reiterate, thank you so much. And can you tell us, Jeryl, sort of what has brought you to this work and why you're here today?
Well, I think access to reproductive services, including abortion care, including pregnancy care, is really, really important. And this work to me is something that I'm very passionate about and very happy to be participating in and grateful to be able to work with Advocates for Youth. But we do have someone joining us on Skype. Debbie will be joining us. So Debbie, please start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm ready. I've been thinking a lot about this opportunity, and I'm just really grateful to be able to speak about not just one story. I think, like all of us, I've got many stories, and I'm just going to highlight one piece of that. And it goes back to when I was 15 years old. So that was 34 years ago. Hard to believe for myself, but I was in a very wonderful relationship with my boyfriend, and we just didn't know anything. I have to say that we enjoyed each other's company. We enjoyed the physicality of our relationship. We knew nothing about what it really meant to have sex, what the implications were, what kinds of birth control methods were out there, how we would access them. We knew nothing, except that we liked hanging out with each other. So we were together for about a year, and then it was a really special evening. I remember it fondly, where we decided, okay, let's take this another step further. And unfortunately, since we didn't know anything and the timing was perfect for getting pregnant, I did get pregnant. So I was 15. He was a little bit older than I was. And so something in my body was changing. I knew something was going on, but I really did not understand. So we talked, we started looking through some books, and we didn't have the internet back in those days. I'm not that old, but it feels like a long time ago. And decided, let's go get a pregnancy test. And again, I mean, you couldn't go to a pharmacy and just buy a pregnancy test. We had to go to a clinic. We had to put my name down, and we put a pseudonym down. We had to give a urine sample. I had to give a urine sample. And then we had to sit in a public waiting area, hoping that no one that we knew walked in, as we sat there for about 45 minutes or so, waiting to get the result. So the result was delivered to us. It was a positive pregnancy test. I think both of us just about fainted, sort of walked into the cold. This was in Pittsburgh. Walked into the cold and just thought about, what are we going to do next? So I remember skipping forward maybe a day or two and saying, I've heard of this place called Planned Parenthood. I'm going to call them. So, looked in the yellow pages and made a phone call and started describing when my last period was. And I'll never forget the woman on the other end of the phone. She said, it sounds like you're really early in your pregnancy, and the procedures that we do, we can't provide a service to you. You'll have to wait a few more weeks. And I thought in my head, are you kidding me? I know what I want. I don't want to be pregnant. And I want to just get this over with now. And I couldn't believe that this person was telling me I actually had to wait longer because I had somehow detected my pregnancy so early on. But then she said, there's at the public hospital, there's a physician there, and I don't remember her name. I wish that I did. I'll put you in touch with her because she's got this procedure that she's doing. You'll have to pay. It costs more money. But she's got this procedure that she does. It's called menstrual extraction. And so long story short, we got in touch with her. It ended up, it was a physician. She was a physician that originally came from India, had the procedure done. It was done with manual vacuum aspiration. And all of this is significant, incredibly significant to me, because we went home, we went to his parents' house after the procedure. It was painful, but I was awake, I was conscious. I was thankful that I didn't have to be put under general anesthesia. I could walk out afterwards. But we went home, we made pizza. I sort of laid on the couch. He treated me really nicely. And we talked about it, and I've seen him since then. I remember seeing him years later, and every time we would see each other, I would say, you know, it's kind of weird. We could have had a 20-year-old, or at this point, we could have had a 35-year-old together, but never, ever regretting the decision. I remember seeing friends of mine in high school who had gotten pregnant, and they had decided to continue with the pregnancy, and the ways in which they were treated were horrendous. So I think that was part of my decision. The stigma was profound, being ostracized and being just set aside from the rest of the students. But I think I also had a really strong sense of, what am I going to do with a baby at this age? I want to study. No one in my family had gone to college. I want to go to college. I have so many plans and fantasies, and I just couldn't imagine doing that. And neither could my boyfriend with a baby. So anyhow, the significance of the details of what procedure took place are that scope ahead many years later, I had been accompanying women, going to abortion clinics and having to face those horrendous crowds with all the imagery and such. Went to graduate school, and when I finished graduate school, my first job was with IPAS. And many of you might know or might not know, IPAS is an international women's health organization that at the time was actually producing the manual vacuum aspiration equipment. And I just remember interviewing for that job and having the biggest smile on my face and sharing with them, not only was the work that IPAS did, was that inspirational to me, and I wanted to work globally on abortion-related issues and policy and practice, but that they themselves, the women manufacturing this device, had changed my life. And I was able to go to the tiny little factory in Carborough, North Carolina, and talk with these women and tell them how they had really had such a profound and positive impact on my life. And now I got to work with them. And I worked with IPAS for 15 years. And so I just want to end actually with my story is that, or other pieces of my story. When I was 40, I got married. I got pregnant immediately. I now have an 8-year-old son. After he was born, in the interim between 1 year and 8 years, I had 2 miscarriages, so a different kind of abortion with pregnancies that were very wanted. So I feel like in a lot of ways, the abortion experiences that I've had are really enmeshed within, as for all of us, right, our broader sexual and reproductive health lives. And this has been one piece that definitely has defined a lot of the work that I do and the perspectives that I hold, and the deep belief that, I want to work toward making sure that women have access, but that women also have access to other alternatives, contraceptives and such, so that they don't, have to make this choice. But when they choose this option, that it's legal, it's safe, they're treated well, we're treated with respect and dignity. And that's my story.
Debbie, thank you so much for sharing that and helping to shatter the stigma. So Julia, as we are coming to the end of this incredible day, I know that there's been a lot of work that you and your team have put into making this day successful. Can you tell us a little bit about how it's been to have this day unfold?
Sure, it's been an incredible experience, Jeryl. When we started, we reached out to the hundreds of people who have already shared their story with us on the 1 in 3 campaign website. And it was immediately people were excited to be part of this day, this moment where many people were coming forward and sharing their experiences. And that was thrilling. And then we actually, before this went live, we had the opportunity to talk with every single person who decided to share their story today. And it was amazing to sort of hear from each person their own unique story, as well as why they wanted to share it. I remember one woman had never shared their story before, and she said to me, I just want to do this because I want to, if I can even help one person feel less alone and feel part of something bigger. And so I think sort of through the process of putting this together and the many hours that our staff worked to build this, it's been an incredible experience. And I'm really happy that we were able to do and pull it together.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Julia. We are joined now by 1 in 3 campaign activist Brianna and the Harvard Watch Party at Harvard University. Welcome, you guys.
Hi!
Hey, so can you guys tell us what it's like to watch the Speakout tonight?
It's been really amazing. So a lot of us have been watching it intermittently throughout the day. But we've been doing board elections, and we have been talking about the Speakout, and we think that it's a really great opportunity to promote awareness of the fact that this is happening across the United States and also on our campus as a way to destigmatize it here and in other places.
Great. So can you tell us why you decided to join the 1 in 3 campaign?
Sure. So as a first year here, I found out about the 1 in 3 campaign through one of the older members of our organization, Harvard College International Women's Rights Collective. And I had the opportunity to go to Advocates for Youth's Urban Retreat and learn a lot more about the campaign, learn about the importance of sharing narratives and using your own story as a way to empower others to feel safe and comfortable sharing their own stories as well. Because I do believe that the way to end a lot of the stigma that surrounds abortion in the United States is to talk about it and to use our personal experiences as a way to do that.
And why do you feel that it's important to challenge stigma in your community?
I think that stigma is a lot more damaging than a lot of people would give it credit for. It's something that is accompanied by shame, and it's something that's accompanied by isolation. 2 things that anybody who's going through the difficult decision or the sometimes difficult decision of having an abortion doesn't need in addition to that decision, especially considering the ways that abortion access is limited. So it's really important to me to see people in my community talking about this as something that is a medical procedure, something that a decision people should be able to make, and something that people should be able to access as needed in my community and across the United States.
Awesome. So what are you guys doing on Harvard's campus in regards to the 1 in 3 campaign or just reproductive rights in general?
So there's a subset of us that is involved in 1 in 3 campaigning on campus. We held a meeting last week open to the campus community as an introduction to the 1 in 3 campaign, where anybody who attended the meeting received 1 in 3 materials, 1 in 3 swag, and they also got a chance to read from the 1 in 3 books that are published with individual abortion narratives. And I think that that really drove home the importance of the personal aspect of abortion for individuals in our community. So that's one of the events that we've already done. We're talking about planning a Speakout on campus for the spring semester. So we have a lot of great events in mind moving forward as well.
Great, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you would like to support the work of Brianna and many other campus groups, please consider donating to the 1 in 3 campaign by visiting www.1in3campaign.org. Julia, I know you have some closing thoughts for us.
Yes, thanks, Jeryl. And I wanted to take the last few minutes to, as an opportunity to really thank all the people who have been involved today. First, I want to thank all the people who shared their stories. We know this is a very bold and courageous act to take, and we really appreciate that. We also want to thank the over 10,000 viewers who joined us throughout today, and thank them for really showing up and supporting people as they came forward and shared their stories, and hopefully will begin their own conversations in their communities to break down the stigma around abortion. I also want to thank the incredible staff at Advocates for Youth who have worked tirelessly to put on today's Speakout, as well as the staff at New Media Mill who have really been instrumental in making today's Speakout a success, and as well as the Interface Media Group where we are located today. I also want to thank the over 1,000 people who pledged to speak out against the stigma around abortion. And I think all of us have an important role to play in the, right now and in the coming weeks to challenge the stigma, because challenging the stigma does not end today. We are going to continue to work together to change the culture and to build support around abortion access. And we want to thank you all once again for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we hope you continue to do this work in your community. Thank you, and thank you both for joining as well.
Thank you.